Okay, hopefully now you're a little bit more familiar with that particular area. We're going to look at now 1C with 4 marks for the techniques. Question 1, part C. And as you can see in the top of the box here, we now have the need of the additional information in the scenario booklet. So let's have a look at that additional information in the scenario booklet. So Rolling's projects and foundations. Assessing and focus on the time box 2. And there are 4 items in here, 4 requirements, all must-haves. Vision is expressed concern. Not all these requirements are achieved in the time box. The SDK think there is some flexibility in the requirements who are reluctant to contradict the business visionary decision maker. Solution developer thinks the display stand could be replaced by 2 roll-up banners. Right? Well, if you look, the display stand is a must-have, right? And the analyst is sure the internal wall posters are not as important as originally stated. Don't forget they can actually go and review the requirements if necessary. Like the business advisor to become involved. They also feel that overtime would enable more requirements. Well, overtime is completely out of the question anyway. We don't do that in Agile project management. Remember, that's out too. So let's look at the questions I've got here and their answers. So the first thing says which 2 actions, and you note we have 5 statements in the answer boxes, therefore we need 2 of those, which it tells you here anyway. So represent an appropriate application and must go by the team. So remember, the team are able to, they're empowered to make decisions about the shoulds and the coulds, but not the must-haves. Do remember, by the way, of course, anything that has a capital H must and an MH, for instance, and here SH and CH, these are requirements. Anything in lowercase are not requirement, must-haves, or should have representation by the phrase. So here we are. Reprioritize the must-have requirements to shoulds. Well, we know they certainly cannot do that, so that's certainly not an answer. Replace the display stand with 2 roll-up banners. Well, when we looked at the information, when we talked about that and said, well, these are must-haves, they are not allowed to do that, not without the approval of the business visionary, of course. Escalator concerned there's not enough contingency of could-haves requirements. That looks like a reasonable idea. In fact, you remember looking at the 4 requirements that are all must-haves. That's a good starting point. Change the priority requirement for internal wall posters from a must to a could. Well, they certainly cannot do that by themselves either. That needs the visionary. And finally, confirm the visionary that the must-have requirements represent the minimum usable subset. Well, that is also a good point, especially when there is a consideration that one of the items may not necessarily be a must. So you could certainly do that. Remember, confirm with the visionary, but at the end of the day, if there is a change to that prioritization, the visionary has to sign it off. So we have answers C and D. That's a good question 2. Now we look at prioritization and the project manager's aspect. So firstly, empower the business advisor to de-scope requirements. Well, apart from the fact that the advisor is only part-time, they certainly don't have the power to de-scope any requirements, certainly from musts to shoulds, and though all those 4 requirements are musts, that is out of order. Review the requirements more closely with the SDT and the visionary as the maybe should to coulds sub-level within the must-haves. Well, that's also quite possible too if they broke them down a little bit further and they provide some contingency that way. So that is a good answer. Plan for only 60% of the effort you spent on must-haves. Well, of course, remember, 60% is a guidance. We do not prioritize to get 60%. We note what we have prioritized and see how that relates to the 60%, mainly because we want to make sure we have a reasonable amount of time being spent on doing the must-haves. So, but we do not make them must-haves just because we need 60%. So that's out. Challenge the must-have requirements for the visionary. Well, of course, that's certainly what they can do, and the visionary can then give his or her feedback and make decisions. Postpone one of the must-have requirements until after the launch. Well, that certainly will not fly here because if we don't do that, it's not going to work. Remember, minimum usable subsets requirements are required. Postponing will not work. That will completely destroy the quality. Okay, so the answers here are B and D. Number 3. Now we look at the team leader's approach. So first, ask the PM to plan a facilitated workshop to consider Moscow set for high-level requirements. The team leader is certainly limited to do that and would be a good move. So that looks like a good answer to start with. B, ensure the SDT does not plan to work overtime to develop requirements. Well, that's certainly a factor too. When we looked at the scenario, it talked about them doing overtime. Well, this does not happen. You cannot get extra resources in either, because this is adding extra costs to the time box, and we do not do that. So working overtime actually takes it time over, and that costs more money too. So we cannot do that either. Ask the visionary to accept the quality of the end products may be reduced. Absolutely not. So we do not do that either. Plan for the solution, test it, only test must have. That does not work either. We have to test everything that's in the time box. Remember, everything has to be tested even before review. So when it's signed off as working. Advise the business sponsor to stop the project. There is no contingency. Well, that's just, a load of rubbish. That does not happen. You do not do that to advise the sponsor. And there is contingency anyway, so that's not true. That's not an answer. So the answer, we're back at A and B, and hopefully they're the two that you picked as well. So let's have a look at the final question, number 4. Now we look at the business analyst. Remember, the business analyst works with the project level team, especially the visionary, to, but not as a business aspect, to help understand and provide some sort of management objective of approach to prioritization, and works directly with it full-time on the team as well to provide that balance. So initially consider all the requirements this won't have, and ask the visionary to justify moving into higher priorities. Well, this is really a very good starting point, and a good proposition by the analysts. So that would be a good answer. Ask the sponsor if the absence of each requirement would stop the company being successful at the launch. Well, again, this is the business analyst's role, and would be expected to do that, would be to challenge them and to ensure that what they are doing, each requirement is a must-have. Let's check the rest. So it looks like A and B are good answers, but let's check the rest. Ask the business sponsor to trigger a few additional requirements to make up the necessary percentage. Well, that's not in favour whatsoever. You do not do this. We do not add requirements. We find the requirements, the should-haves and could-haves, in some of the high-level must-haves. That's what you really ought to be doing. Do not tie the requirements to the program objectives if this is thought to be too restrictive. Well, that's exactly what you need to do, so you cannot move that. That's a non-statement. Allow only the business sponsors to prioritize requirements. Well, of course, you don't do this either. Remember, the prioritization exercise is done in workshops, and you need to get a good balance of the roles on the project team to be in there to provide a sort of a business stroke technical balance between them, viewpoints on both sides of the fence. The manager there to provide an objective input to keep an understanding, a proper understanding. So here the answers are A and B. And hopefully you fared fairly well on that question. Remember, if there are any concerns, review the chapters on prioritization for Moscow. And if that's still leaving you a little bit uncertain about some of the answers here, which you may have got wrong, and why they were wrong, then please address that with the tutor through the platform portals to ask for further help. Thank you.